Hello everybody, my name is Michael Laubscher, and today I'm going to speak to you all about an incredible 11-day adventure in Uganda. Now this 11-day journey throughout East Africa starts in Entebbe. International flight lands and we spend one night at one of the guest houses close to the airport, about a 10-minute drive. This time around we spent a night at Boma Guest House, and early the next morning we flew out to Kisese airstrip, where we then met our guide on the ground. It's about an hour's flight, depending on how many hops or stops you do along route, but an hour to hour and a half flight. We meet your guide, and then we made our way to Kibale National Park, where we then spend 3 nights. So the real adventure only starts on day 2, where we spend 3 nights in Kibale, and this then includes 2 chimpanzee trekking experiences. And seeing that we get there fairly early on the first day, this allows guests to settle in, unpack into the rooms, because we've got 3 nights there. And this also allows us to kind of get a feel for the forest, especially the light in and around the forest. There's a big walking trail around the camp that you can make use of, or you can do an additional or optional activity to the swamps or whatever it may be, birding and monkey walks, to go photograph and just kind of suss out the lay of the land, which is generally quite a good thing to kind of start understanding what you're going to be facing as a photographer while out in the field with the chimpanzee. On that first evening, also what I really like to do with the guests that join me is I go through a short presentation as to what to expect and photographs to kind of have in mind when out in the forest with the great apes in Uganda. Because with me running around 5 guests, I can't always be by your side. I have to help other people as well. And in doing so and running through this presentation, it gives you a good kind of artsy thing to think about when I'm not by your side giving you tips for looking at a close-up of a hand or whatever the case may be. So the power of the subconscious mind is incredible, hence the reason I ran through this presentation. Early to bed that first evening, because the next day is at 8 o'clock start with a briefing at the tracking center, which is literally a very short distance from the lodge. Enjoy the briefing, get assigned to your guide, and off you go trekking into the forest. For the most part, we had 2 very separate experiences out there. Same goes for guerrilla trekking. You can either walk from the tracking center or you do a short drive out. But the first track we did a walk straight out. To the second track we drove to a point and walked from there. Now these animals are obviously wild. They are habituated, meaning they're used to the presence of humans, but they still go about their day-to-day behavior as a wild chimpanzee would do. They're not relying on us for any food or anything like that, so they still live their normal lives out there. They just tolerate the presence of humans. So you go in chimpanzee tracking slightly different. You head out and your walk itself is tranquil, quiet, in smaller groups. But usually when you get to the chimps, because they're quite far spread out, they're moving a lot, the chances of you bumping into other groups of humans during this walk, very likely, especially when you're on the ground with the chimp at the time. Now, as mentioned, our 2 tracks we did there were very, very different. We had one day where we had chimpanzee very high up in the trees, and it, to say the least, was very challenging to photograph due to light, due to the angle that you had to kind of look up. We all had stiff necks the next day. Just kidding. No one had stiff necks. Gin and tonic helped us there. But so quite challenging with them up in the trees moving, but still we were able to capture really cool looking moments and high key kind of moments where you have this dark animal up against a beautiful green canopy, which added great texture and value add to that scene, and just something a bit different and unique. And it was a great opportunity to use these big trees as leading lines, taking your viewers' eyes to the chimpanzee. So a great experience, a lot of fun, but on that particular trip, the very first chimp we spent time with before he decided to go up was the alpha male, and we got really close to him, which was really cool. Or let's say he got really close to us. We were on a pathway and he came towards us, sat down, and it offered incredible wide photography opportunities because he literally sat down right in front of us. There was a beautiful tree kind of overgrowing the path that he was sitting on, and it was just a really stunning photographic opportunity. And the fact that we were the only people with him, myself and the 4 wildlife guests that I were hosting, had incredible time with this animal. He sat still for long enough for us to photograph him, to take videos of him, to change positions and angles, focal lengths, and also to just enjoy time by putting the cameras down and watching this animal while he's picking insects out of his fur and eating, and it was just really a cool moment. And then from there he got up and made his way up into the canopies. We also had good moments with chimp walk-bys where they're literally sitting doing nothing, and suddenly they're going to be in their bonnet, they're up and they're moving, and they come. We had multiple walk-bys where we had chimps right next to us. I think everyone in our group probably got touched by a chimp this time around. So that was really exciting, and that gets the blood flowing. And then we also had a chimp guided walk this time around where we had the male who was second in charge walking up ahead of us, and our whole group was basically trailing this animal through the forest as he was going about his ways, calling, communicating, because they often use the trees in these forests that they run up and they jump and kick and hit, and these echoes running through the bark and through the floors of the canopy of the forest is one way in which these animals communicate. So it's always an eventful and always very exciting experience being with chimpanzee on foot. They're very lively, very vocal, and a lot of fun. And in saying that, a great intro into what this experience is. Essentially, it is the great apes are highlighting the reason of this trip is you want to spend time with chimps, but ultimately get to those silverback gorillas or those mountain gorillas, the big silverbacks. And so the introduction of chimp tracking is a really good way to start this trip. And then, yeah, so as mentioned, it's an 8 o'clock start to your day. It's a briefing, and off you go on foot. Regardless, it depends on what the animal movements are, but it's usually about an hour track in or so. You're with the chimp, you spend an hour with them, and it's about 40 minutes to an hour back out of the forest. And then from that point onwards, you get back to the lodge fairly early, so you enjoy a lunch, a nice cold drink, either G&T or a beer, whatever makes you dizzy and what makes you happy, water, whatever it may be. Hydration's key, so if you are planning on coming out, please make sure that you bring rehydrate sachets and supplements as well to ensure that you're replacing those electrolytes. Now, after 2 fairly long days on foot tracking chimpanzee and editing those photos in the downtime of the afternoon that we have at the camp, we then make our way into Queen Elizabeth National Park. Now, based on availability, this time around we spent a night at Moya Safari Lodge and our second night at Ishasha Wilderness. Now, Moya Safari Lodge offers a boat cruise along the Kazinga Channel, which is a really tranquil experience. It's a nice way to kind of break up, not really vehicle-bound safaris, but more walking safaris. We would have had about a 2.5 to 3 hour day in the morning during our drive from Kibali to Queen Elizabeth. So therefore, that's a lot of time in a vehicle for the day. And so breaking it up with a boat cruise on the Kazinga Channel is very special. So followed by the lunch that we enjoy overlooking this channel. Later that afternoon we went down at about 2 o'clock and we enjoyed a 2-hour-long boat cruise where you often, it's always so different out there as to what we see, but the standard critters out there are usually very active kingfisher nests along the bank, along with many other bird species that you'll find around this water system. But then also we have a lot of buffalo that kind of bask in the sun and bathe in the water's edges. Hippo, we had a nice tiny little baby hippo, which, yes, probably a week old, if that, super relaxed and super used to the presence of the vehicles. We even had 2 young monitor lizards trying to hunt a frog. We heard this noise as we were banked up on the edge. We heard this noise coming from the front of the boat, and we kind of peered over, and a monitor had this frog in its mouth. I did get a video of it, but it was so quick, so sudden. Frog got away. Everyone was happy except the monitor lizards. But so, like I said, it's so unpredictable out on those waters. You just need to keep your eyes and ears open, and you're bound to see something really interesting. But one thing that never lets us down on that channel are the movement of elephant. There are so many elephant that come down to that water source and enjoy a drink, enjoy a mud bath, and the behaviors that we always on every single trip get to experience, including this one. Young males fighting, animals feeding, resting in the shade, mudding themselves, drinking. There's just so much activity. So it's a very eventful 2 hours on the water and a nice tranquil experience and a really cool way to spend the afternoon. We got back to the camp that afternoon at about 4:30 or just after, or just before 4:30, excuse me. And the guests on the trip opted to, instead of enjoying a sundown and a drink up at the pool, which has, like I mentioned, a spectacular view of this channel, we opted to head out and see what we can find. So we raced out and we got to an area quite far out, but our guide David they are amazing at what they do out there, and he did his homework while we were out on the boat, figuring out where high-profile sightings were. He had news that there were lions quite a drive off, but that was our objective. We raced there that afternoon, and I was quite amazed as to where these lions were. We saw this tree, and obviously Queen Elizabeth, known for tree climbing lion. I had no idea there'd be lion in this tree. This massive candelabra euphorbia. I wouldn't even think a bird could fit in between those branches. And we were approaching this tree, and I was blown away. We had 2 subadult lion lying sleeping in this tree. So a really unique photographic opportunity. We had moment enough where this cat kind of looked through gaps. The light was beautiful. So it was really a worthwhile trip out there and cool to see and experience. And then en route back, we did spot a leopard, but quite a shy individual, and it then just decided to hunker down and not kind of show its face to us, which is okay, because the safari is obviously targeting the large apes and the tree climbing lions of Queen Elizabeth. So night spent there, beautiful dinner, and an early start the next day to make our way down to Ishasha Wilderness. And that morning we saw a really large pride of lion in that same area where we saw them in the euphorbia the day before. The entire pride, males, females, cubs, was really cool. Some of them were actually trying to hunt cob, unsuccessful. And from that point onwards, we decided we'll make our way down further south to Ishasha en route. Enjoyed our breakfast. We took a nice packed breakfast, enjoyed that and a nice coffee, and kept rolling. Then we got to Ishasha Wilderness Camp at about 1 o'clock that afternoon. Checked in, settled in, got our lunch in, and then thereafter made our way out on our afternoon safari. They received quite a lot of rain in this area before we arrived, and so therefore unpredictability of Mother Nature is a real thing. I'm sure we all know, for those of you who are seasoned safari goers. The grass was very tall, very difficult to spot animals. We saw tons of plains game, some beautiful elephant sightings, and the afternoon, or that afternoon, the end of it was really a big highlight. We were actually making our way back to camp. It had been a long day, and the guests called, listen, let's just go back to camp, have a gin tonic. We got an intel that there were 2 male lion up in a fig tree. Went to this tree, they weren't there, nowhere to be seen, and we thought, well, we missed out. Let's go and enjoy a gin tonic. And we did this big loop and came back, and our guide stopped, and in the distance was this fig tree. He picked up his binoculars and he says, you'll never guess what he's seeing. And it was a male lion in a tree. So we kind of did a U-turn and raced straight back, and we had this lion in the tree. Beautiful, but quite a messy area of the tree. He also had a big collar, and as exciting as it was seeing a big male lion in the tree, he was sleeping. He did have a collar. They weren't the best photographic opportunities, but there was another vehicle that came in, stopped behind us, and they said, there's another lion down here, and he said it was a female. A couple of minutes went by. We were about to kind of pack up in gear and just head back to the lodge, and suddenly I just saw these paws in the V of this tree, this fork of this tree. I saw these paws, and I just shouted to the guests, ladies, there's a lion climbing the tree, there's a lion climbing the tree, there's a lion climbing the tree. And as it lifted its head up over the side, I just see this huge mane, and the first thing I thought is like, geez, this is a strange looking female, because the guy behind us told us this was a female. There's this massive male lion, obviously this guy's brother, standing in the fork of this beautiful fig tree. We reversed, got into position, and this cat again just spoilt us because he allowed us to shoot wider, tighter, change settings, video, watch him. It was a really cool moment. He then kind of went up onto the side, lay on a more open and bare kind of part of the tree. We looped around and we had this beautiful, beautiful view of him kind of looking around, whipping his tail for us. It was a really pretty scene, and we got best of both worlds. Golden light sitting on his face, and from the other side, beautiful sunset colors in the sky photographing into the fig tree. It was a phenomenal way to end that afternoon. Back to camp, dinner, and again, early the next morning, we head out. We opted to take a packed breakfast with us so that we don't have to kind of go out, come back into camp and go again. But we took our packed breakfast, packed our bags, left early that morning at about 6:30 and enjoyed our breakfast on the banks of the river. We saw 2 lioness a bit later in the morning. It was a little bit hot, so we decided, we've had a good time here. We knew the males had already moved over to the Congo because we found the carcass that they were feeding on that night. The rangers were actually tracking them with the technology they have, and they had told us, yes, they'd moved here, they killed and ate this cob and moved over the river into the Congo. So we decided, well, let's make our way to Bwindi Impenetrable Forest. Now from the Queen Elizabeth or from Ishasha Wilderness area, it's about a 2.5 hour drive, give or take, depending on which gate you leave from. But it's a beautiful drive. I love driving through these areas. You see how the locals live their lives, how they farm, the beautiful crater lakes. It's just really, really scenic. But upon arrival in Bwindi, check into our lodge, which is Bahoma, and this is where we spend our last 4 nights, because this includes 3 gorilla tracks. Now, the tracking obviously takes place in the morning, so our first day of arrival, we don't have any activities planned. Some guests opted to go to Ride for a Woman Foundation, do village tours. They kind of learn and see how they grow coffee and their bananas and make banana gins and all this kind of stuff. So really interesting. You can go visit the pygmy people, whatever it may be. But it is also a good time to just kind of put your feet up, relax before what will be 3 fairly strenuous days to come. Edit some photos, enjoy a drink, retreat to bed early. Because again, that next morning, we walk down, so the briefing station is literally down the road, so we see it as a good warm-up. Take our walking sticks, get up with our gaiters, which the lodges provide, walking boots, the works, lunch tins in our backpacks, because there you're out for slightly longer than you would be for chimp tracking, so you take lunch with you in case you're in the forest and you need to eat lunch shortly after you've spent your time with gorillas. So you gear up, you make your way to the info center. There's a woman dancing, cheering. It's a really cool festive environment. Then there's the briefing, and you then get allocated your gorilla groups. Now, gorilla tracking is slightly different to chimp tracking, whereas you get allocated into a group with a maximum of 8 tourists, and it's only those 8 tourists that visit the family of gorilla you get allocated. So you won't be bumping into random people en route or with gorillas. And the tracks there vary so much because it all depends on where the animals are moving, what they're doing. I think our longest track was our second one, was a 40-minute walk in, an hour with a gorilla, and about a 40-minute walk out, give or take, because it was fairly up and down in and up and down out. But really easy going. The other tracks were a lot shorter. I think the first was 35 minutes. We saw them, but that was just kind of very steep and challenging, but we got there and it's a slow pace. And then our third and last track, I think I timed it on my watch because I tracked my activities out there. I think it was below 3 minutes. It was just over 2 minutes and I saw a gorilla. So very easy going on the last track and a cool way to end. But in saying that, not only are the tracks so different, the experiences with the gorillas are also very, very different. And we got to enjoy some really cool moments, some of which were very close interactions with babies, which, I mean, that's always cute. One baby even grabbed one of our guests' lens hoods. Obviously, we do try and back out and steer clear. The guides do say kind of give them space, give them away, but just the area we were in at that very moment, it was very difficult to move because it was just so thick, or it was quite steep, and we couldn't really move. But we do kind of get out the animal's way if we are able to do so, and as long as it's safe for us to do so. But yeah, close baby encounters, female encounters, but also very close silverback encounters, which that really gets your blood running, because they obviously look up at you. They're mammoth. They're monstrous animals. They're huge. You look at the size of those hands and their forearms, it really, it's like you stop breathing for the duration they're standing near you. But a really cool and exciting moments with these large animals. We had playfulness of babies where they were just being kids, really, jumping around, falling, swinging on vines, sitting in trees, and just kind of putting up a show, all while in a really scenic and beautiful environment, and at times really cool views of the forests and or the village down below in the backdrop, which is a really unique way to capture these gorillas, knowing that these animals are living on a border where human and wildlife conflict is such a real thing, but managed extremely well. But in saying that, we had babies nursing, so kind of taken so far away from the reality of that they're living on the border of settled or communities that are farming in these areas. We had a baby gorilla suckling and enjoying some milk on our very first track early in, and again it was only us 5 wildlife guests enjoying this very moment, and really special to be a part of. And then on our so that was the start of it, like kind of new life, introduction to it all. And then the end of our stay was, our last track, and the last photograph we all took was like a little family portrait. So we started with an introduction to a family with a brand new baby, and then we ended with a family portrait where we had a massive silverback, a little baby, and then a female came into the scene and joined it. It was just a really cool way to end the whole adventure in East Africa. And I always try and explain to people just how incredible it is tracking these great apes, because it is one of the coolest things you can ever do in Africa. And it has, gorilla tracking in particular, has been labeled one of Africa's biggest bucket list items, and I can't sit here and explain to you as to why. This video would have done some justice, but it is only truly experienced or understood once experienced, because the feeling and the rush you get when you're standing next to this animal that's like nearly 3 times your weight and size is something that's very difficult to put into words. But myself and the guests that joined, thank you again for joining me. It was such a great time, many good laughs, and a really cool adventure filled with memorable moments, great photography, many good laughs. And I look forward to heading out there again. It'll be the same time next year, where I host it from May into June, and I do really look forward to hosting any of you there. If you do have questions regarding this trip, please feel free to get in touch. I will happily assist in answering any of the questions you may have. And I look forward to creating really cool adventures with you up in the mountains in Uganda. Until then, have a good one and chat soon. Bye bye.